my house to yours. Welcome to EMS at C-Level. We are talking to Eric Miscoll and Dieter Weiss, who are currently in Germany after spending a week in Scandinavia touring various EMS factories. Guys, thanks so much for your time talking to me. Eric, perhaps you can start by just giving me a brief overview of your tour schedule this week.
Yeah, no, thanks, Phil, and thanks for doing this. Yes, we toured 5 EMS here this week. We began the week with an Enics facility, but of course, Enics has been acquired by GPV Group. We then went to Kitron. We saw Inission. We visited with Orbit One, and then yesterday we ended with Scanfil. So really, I think those are of the top 6. It was like 5 of the top 6 EMS located in this region.
Yeah. Okay. And Dieter, give me a quick overview of the size and scale of the Scandinavian market, and particularly the Swedish market where you've been this week.
Well, number one, we do have in Scandinavia about 6% of production of European EMS companies, of which Sweden is 2.4%. We are talking about 75 legal entities in Sweden, which belong to 64 EMS companies, and some of those legal entities have more than one factory. So we're roughly talking about 85 factories in Sweden, and we're going to get to that. They are, in our opinion, very advanced, and the main purpose of our tour is to learn more and understand this market better every day. What the thing we did last year as well.
Yeah. And what I wanted to ask was that when you look at the Scandinavian market, it feels like a very mature EMS market where there are very strong OEM partnerships. Tell me a little bit about how you saw that and how much of OEM manufacturing is actually outsourced in Scandinavia. Eric, maybe you can give me a anecdotal feel of what you see, and then Dieter can drill down on the numbers a little.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because we didn't intend to ask about this, but we found ourselves asking each of the EMS that we've been with, kind of their assessment of how much of the domestic OEM market has been outsourced. And of course, the history of outsourcing here is quite long. Most factories that we saw go back to Ericsson. Most of those transitioned to Flextronics, right? So there's that a healthy dose of that throughout the market here in Sweden. We're in at least one of the one in Orbit One in Ronneby was the Flextronics facility for years, right? So we have a lot of those in X-Flex. So, but what we're hearing is that it's much more mature than we had thought, and that we had expected to hear, actually, right? And Dieter can talk about some of the numbers, but generally speaking, what we're hearing from these Swedish EMS is that from an OEM basis, they think it's 70% or more of the electronics manufacturing has been transitioned to the EMS market.
Yeah, well, that's substantial, and Dieter, that's quite a bit higher than what we traditionally think of as a European level or even a US level.
Yes. To be honest, we had not too much focused on this issue in the past. We know roughly, or we assumed roughly, that 38 to 39% of the European electronic production would be manufactured by EMS companies. And we always, when we had this discussion with IPC, that they felt that in the United States, we were talking about 45 to 48%. So much more outsourcing in the United States and Europe. Now, when we now learned that in Scandinavia, the outsourcing level is much higher, and assuming that 6% of the production values done in Scandinavia, it's easy mathematics to come to the conclusion that we are in actual fact already at a European level of 41%. And thinking this a little further, we have to do more work and check this in Eastern Europe in general, and I think we will have a higher share there as well. So when we are finished with this analysis, I think it could easily be that we are running up to the United States level in regards to 48, 45, 48%.
Yeah. And the kind of elephant in the room, the big issue in Scandinavia this year has been the acquisition of Enics by GPV. When we talked last year, I predicted there would be $3 billion EMS companies by the end of this year. I know we've got 2 months to go, but I might have missed one of those three. What's the feeling on the ground about the GPV acquisition of Enics, and where does that leave the European market in terms of size and rankings?
Yeah, well, we know if we just leave out the global player, which have factories over here in Europe, and focus on the European players, then for sure Zollner is still the biggest. And Scanfil always was the runner-up, but already below 1 billion euro in revenues. They had 695.7 million in 2021. Now, the combination of Enics and GPV forming this GPV Group definitely will bring the combined revenues in 2022 to more than 1 billion, which finally creates a second European billion euro company. And we have heard it from the publication of the Q3 results of Scanfil. They revised their numbers as well, bringing them further up, and they are now predicting their annual numbers to be between 820 and 840 million euros, which is an increase compared to the previous year of 18 to 21%.
So they're that close to making you very.
They're that close. They're that close. We need to find them a lot more business by the end of the year, so I can be right. But I'll make another prediction for next year, and we'll see how we go. So you mentioned already, Dieter, that you thought one of the impressions you came away with was how advanced they were. I wanted to ask you, Eric, because you've seen a lot of factories in different parts of the world. When you come to the end of a week like this, you think about, what are my impressions of Scandinavian EMS? What's the kind of feeling? Do you look at it and go, this is a really automated industry, or this is a very regional industry? What are the characteristics that really shine through?
Yeah, no, good question. And similar to what we said last year when we did our tour, it's hard to discuss any one of these issues in isolation because they're so interrelated. So yes, this is very automated, very efficient, very environmentally conscious. A lot of things being done with that. We've actually, every company we've been in, we've asked about the impact of the energy crisis in Europe, right? And how that's impacting. Now, what we're learning and what we've learned is that it's very different for Swedish and Scandinavian countries than it is for countries like Germany, where we are currently. But that's because, in Sweden, the energy is 40% hydro, 40% nuclear. What is it? 12 to 14% wind, and the rest is kind of burning wood byproducts kind of thing, right? And it's so it's very clean that way. But the automation is everywhere. We see that, you see lines being improved and updated. You see more post-reflow manufacturing functions being automated or planning to be automated, and a big drive for efficiencies. And everybody's talking about lean principles. And one person I think even pulled out their lean books that this is our Bible, right? So, and really kind of driving those efficiencies.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Dieter, they're pretty good at making a profit there. It's, if you look at the Scandinavians in terms of their financial performance, they've done pretty well through the pandemic and continue to be able to produce quite profitable business.
Oh, yes. Well, if we look at the average revenue decline in Scandinavia, it was just 2.3% in 2020. And afterwards, easily picked up again. And now we have to be careful on this. We know in Scandinavia, we have 4 different currencies. We have the Danish krona, we have the Norwegian krona, we have the Swedish krona, and in Finland, we have the euro. So it is difficult to make a general statement because if I just look at Sweden, for example, Sweden had a growth rate in 2021 in regards to their revenues in euro of 12.5%. But if you now look at the fact how that converted into Swedish krona, in Swedish krona, it was just 8.9%. And that is what you have to realize we are over here in Europe, we are 42 different countries manufacturing EMS business. And in actual fact, 55% of those revenues are not invoiced in euro, but in different currencies. And sorry, I don't have the exact number now in my head, but I would assume that we are talking about 18 different currencies.
Just give me a few highlights of the factories you visited. You started with an Enics facility, which is becoming GPV. Was it Kitron was the next one?
Kitron was the next one, then Inission, Orbit, One and Scanfil is kind of how the flow of it. We saw some really efficient factories. We saw, for example, even the Scanfil one we were at yesterday, there was a lot of, I don't want to say clutter, it was very busy, but that's because of the business ramping, the expansion. A lot of them, listen, one of the challenges here and in the rest of the industry is increased inventory that they're having to hold.
Of course.
We talk about its impact on their finances. It also have an impact on footprint in the factory. This has to go somewhere, right? So some of them, do that. We see some companies investing more in component towers to hold some of this stuff. It's very, the facilities are in transition, I guess I would say, and that, they're adjusting to this increased business.
And they're ramping, absolutely. And it's exciting to see that. So the 2 big issues that must have come up in conversations this week, component shortages and talent shortages. What's the feedback from Scandinavia on component shortages? Do they sense there's an easing?
I think the general sense I got is that there's an easing, and that also and if they look at the ramp on the numbers, right? So you saw the pandemic, the overall EMS, you saw the downturn, then we saw that big upbuild, right? And there's a lot of factors behind that from, consumers' demand mostly is what's been driving that, right? Had there been more components available, there would have been more product shipped during that time. But then, we're also getting a sense that there may be an easing coming into next year as well. They can't keep on the same trajectory that it's been on. The components definitely is there. The general sense is that's moderating, is what I got from it, right?
Yes. Well, first of all, looking at 2022, we at in4ma at the moment are forecasting for the Western European market a growth rate of 18.8%.
Wow.
Which we probably won't see to that extent in Eastern Europe, because in Eastern Europe we are very often talking about high volume, low mix products. And that is, as we all know, the 3C: computers, consumer and communication. And those markets, after the pandemic, after all this time in home office, is saturated now. Everybody has those equipments. Maybe there is 1 or 2 PlayStations still missing, but other than that, there is no big growth.
Yeah. Hey, another issue that kind of underlies the market, at least up here, is the small percentage of work that they actually do in automotive, right?
Yeah.
So compared to the rest of Europe,
Compared
that
to
is
Germany,
definitely kind of, in a sense, makes their books healthier, right? So to speak.
Yeah. We still do see that companies who have a higher share in automotive, and higher being defined of more than 20% of their revenues in automotive, still have a bigger problem, because the automotive industry during I wouldn't call it, no, it has not been a semiconductor allocation. I wouldn't even call it a crisis. I would call it demand has been higher than supply. Demand already being 20% higher than the previous year. So I question whether there was a crisis, but most of the EMS companies who have customers outside the automotive industry have been able to agree with their customers that they were able at least to forward the majority of their increased costs with higher component costs, but as well with additional logistical costs. They had part shipments and all of this. Whereas the automotive industry said, well, we got a contract. Strictly, you get nothing in addition. So if I am a manufacturer and have 2 kind of customers, one in the automotive and the other one in the non-automotive, I'm gonna clearly think who gets priority.
By the way, and another thing that clearly what we're hearing is the amount of spot buys that happened this past year was really
sky high.
Sky high, which again impacts kind of the financials and what these guys have on their books and what their performance is.
I think it's really interesting. And I think when I look at it from a point of view of, everybody's been having to tell their customers that they can't deliver on time, they can't ship on time, and there's been pain there. But with a lot of OEM EMS relationships, it seems to have strengthened that relationship. With EMS component distributor relationships, not so much. I think there are some real challenges there, and I think 2023 will be a time to get everybody around the table and make peace and figure out a good way forward.
I don't even know that it has to be. It's interesting that we have EMS talking about increasing prices, right? Or having increased prices. When have you heard of this before, right? We've been talking about that to some this week. It was always in the contract. The OEMs wanted those regular price reductions. That's out. It seems to be out the window now, and we're certainly focused on that. Listen, the other issue you questioned was the HR thing, and that's absolutely. I'd say from an HR perspective, the first thing that struck me as I go to these guys, they all know each other, right? They all know each other. They all each know each other's business. They know who's doing what. So that's clear. And the HR people, the HR thing, there is still an issue with that. And but they also, that's where automation comes in too, right? That degree to automate it.
That's a mitigation.
And you need a higher level of talent then to kind of do that. And there's a lot of talk about how to engage younger workers in this type of work. And you can't do that. And some people even said, I can't have older people, younger people sitting there hand soldering stuff. They're not going to do it, right? But I can get them working on computers, or they can work with the robots here.
Programming.
That is kind of cooler work and is much more engaging. Were you trying to say something?
Well, number one is they know each other due to the fact that every second of them has been working in Flex. That's number one. But the interesting part of it as well is in regards to HR. If we look at the factories, and if we just split between PCBA and box building to form full systems, the majority of the people are working in the box building area, and it's relatively small in the PCBA. So
Yes,
I have been asked this week by one company, what do you think, what could be further done in regards to automation of the PCBA line? And they said, well, you just need to go into those factories and you will see at the moment, nobody thinks about further automation, the PCBA lines, because the big potential for further automation, talking about cobots and all of this, at the moment lies in the box building. That is another difference between mainland Europe and Scandinavia. We were told by all the companies we saw that between 60 and 80% of their revenues are full system build. And that is different, for example, to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. The companies in Scandinavia, they're actually not really interested in manufacturing PCBAs. They want to have the full system. And the OEM customers do understand the huge advantage by transferring not just the PCBA, but the full system, and having a lower capital binding in their own companies, and being able to focus on R&D, sales, and marketing of the products.
Which speaks to the maturation of the industry, which we go.
Well, absolutely. I think it's full circle. It does speak to the maturity, and it speaks to the fact that they're a little bit more sophisticated. And I think the fact that the OEMs understand the value they're being delivered means the EMS can get the value that they need to be a bit more profitable, and it's a virtuous circle that allows them to invest in that advanced automation and adaptable automation you speak of. What's the plan for next week, guys? You've got a week before I meet you in Munich for Electronica.
That's right. Yes.
Where are you going on Monday?
So we're still recharging. We got in at midnight last night, right? And it's only noon right now. So, and so, by the way, if we see all of these thoughts, we're still kind of putting them all together. So you're catching us at a very raw time. We'll be a little more considered in our comments as we move forward. But Monday we leave for France. We will drive over to France. We have meetings every day next week. I think we're seeing 3 of the big French ones. Why don't you know who we're doing?
We start in Normandy with Asteel Flash over there. Then we move on, and in actual fact, the distances in France are much bigger than they are in Scandinavia. So we're going to be on the road quite long. Our first trip from over here to the Normandy will be 6 hours drive to get to Asteel Flash. From there, it will become very exciting, because we have an invitation to see the newest Lacroix Electronique factory in the Loire Valley. I'm really already excited about that. Followed then by a visit to All Circuits, which is going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, there's just been a big extension built there as well.
Then we continue to Paris. We have an evening meeting there, which is going to be very interesting as well. And then we head on Thursday morning to Belgium to meet with CMAC, which are doing ceramic hybrid work on top of EMS work. And they are doing direct copper bonding with MOSFETs for power electronics. This is going to be, I think, very interesting for Eric in specific. And then we move on the same day. We have a second meeting in the Netherlands. We are going to visit VDL TBP Electronics. You might remember VDL was a company that tried to buy New Ways last year, but failed with their offer. And then as the TBP company the owner wanted to retire. They bought this company, and in actual fact, we're going to report about that. They are planning of doubling this factory over there to become one of the real big players in the Netherlands. And on Friday, we start with another big player, which is ProDrive Technology, where Eric and I were both, to say so, sitting in the fog. We really don't know exactly what to expect.
You don't know what to expect.
Yeah, because everybody knows New Ways in the Netherlands being a big player. But I, in the past, when I published the list of the top 50 in Europe, then people come up to me and say, well, who's ProDrive Technologies? So that's going to be interesting.
So now you're going to be able to answer them.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be able to give them answers.
Then after we return to Germany, we will visit with 3 or 4.
Well, number one is on the Friday afternoon, we're going to go to Düsseldorf and see a medium-sized company there. And as we want to make sure that we use our time most efficiently, we even will have a Saturday meeting in southern Germany on Saturday at lunchtime with Fritsch Electronic.
That's right.
And then we will have just a Sunday off. And on Monday morning, first thing, we go to Bavaria Digitaltechnik, another medium-sized company in Fronten, followed by another Kartech factory in Mauerstetten.
Mauerstetten,
we then finally hit to Munich.
Then we come in Munich, Phil.
Yeah. So next time I talk to you, you'll be on the floor of Electronica. Looking forward to that and catching up with some of these companies, and looking forward to catching up with you guys. I think you'll be exhausted. I think you'll need to have a lay down, a beer, a pretzel, and revive and get ready for the show. Have a wonderful week next week. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for telling me about your Scandinavian adventure, and we'll talk again soon. All the best.
Thanks, Phil.